Introducing Home. Home is a 3D community for PlayStation 3. It's an interactive virtual space where users meet up, hang out, and explore a connected world. It's free of charge and available directly from the PlayStation 3 cross-media bar. Everyone you meet within Home is an online PlayStation 3 user. Each person can customize their clothes and facial characteristics with millions of potential combinations.
Call me old-fashioned, but when I want to meet with friends, I'll go down the pub and have a few drinks, go round to their place for a couple of rounds of Mario Kart, or have them over for a party. In fact, I think I'd be several pages into my list of ways to hang out with friends, a document that I definitely do have, before you got to meet them in a virtual space using avatars of ourselves. Again though, perhaps I'm just old-fashioned. As odd as this concept might sound, this may actually be the future of social interaction, or at least it will be if the likes of Big Zucks get their way. Indeed, tech pioneers the world over are investing millions upon millions of dollars into the Metaverse, a digital space that effectively functions as a second life for users. Get a job, meet people, buy things, all of this will be possible in the Metaverse if and when it comes to fruition. What I bet you didn't know though is that Sony has already been there and done that. It's true. In 2008, they launched PlayStation Home, a social gaming platform so ahead of its time that the world just wasn't ready for it as it closed down in 2015. But what exactly happened to PlayStation Home? What was Sony trying to achieve with the platform, and did it fail because it was 15 years ahead of its time, or because Joe Public isn't actually all that interested in the Metaverse or anything like it? I think it's about time we found out. Don't you? I'm Ben from TripleJump, and this is the untold story of PlayStation's 2008 Metaverse. Released into beta in December 2008, PlayStation Home was a social gaming platform created by Sony for the PS3. It allowed players to create a little avatar which they could customize in whatever way they saw fit and kit out with a variety of clothing items, and gave them an apartment which could be filled with furniture that was either free, bought, or won. If they were so inclined, users could purchase premium spaces such as a summer house or a yacht, and even start their own clubs with a dedicated clubhouse with space for up to 32 members. Outside of their apartment was a world that was filled with mini-games, adverts, and places where users could network with one another. The advertising was predominantly dedicated to upcoming and trending releases, with the likes of an explorable Diagon Alley from Harry Potter, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 receiving a launch event, and an Uncharted 3 Drake's Deception mini-game. Sounds a little familiar, doesn't it? The wider world consisted of the Home Square, which was sort of a central hub for people to meet and chat, and 5 distinct districts: Action District, Sports Walk, Adventure District, Pier Park, and Indie Park. Each district showcased different genres. For example, FPS fans would be right at home in the Action District, whilst fans of indie titles would have had more fun in Indie Park. In addition to visiting Home Square and each of the districts, users could take on quests which they could complete in order to earn rewards, and these would usually involve visiting certain places or playing one of the different mini-games that were on offer. The whole concept sounds quite interesting, but I do have to wonder how on earth it came about in the mid-2000s. Admittedly, the likes of Habbo Hotel and Second Life had their fans, but what made Sony think they needed their own metaverse? What came to be PlayStation Home actually started out life as an online lobby for PS2 game The Getaway Black Monday, but with online PS2 users being somewhat rare, the idea ended up being repurposed for the PlayStation Network on PS3. PlayStation Home was officially announced in March 2007 during a keynote presentation from then SCE Worldwide Studios president Phil Harrison. Based on that announcement, it seems Sony firmly believed that the platform was the future of gaming. According to Izumi Kawanishi, corporate executive and chief technology officer of software at SCE, this is a significant step forward into the area of user community services and emergent entertainment experiences. While the 3D graphics demonstrate the power of PS3 and the PlayStation Network, the most impressive feature in Home is the variety of ways in which multiple consumers, as well as our third-party partners, can experience the next generation of communication by interacting and sharing among each other. I feel strongly that this unique blend of community, user-generated content, collaboration, and commerce will expand the future of computer entertainment. It's clear then that PlayStation Home was no accident. Rather than simply being a project that didn't work on an old console, it seems that Sony had a clear vision for the future of gaming, one in which players wouldn't just simply hop onto voice chat with their friends to talk about their gaming experiences, but where they could come together in a virtual world, show off their personalities and how they design their avatars and decorate their apartments, and see their friends' achievements in virtual trophy rooms. It was a nice idea in theory, but in practice, things didn't exactly go as Sony had planned. Sony's vision for a platform with a sense of community was certainly admirable, but it seems like they forgot about one small, tiny, itty-bitty thing. Internet users are, by and large, dicks. Not you watching at home right now, of course, you're all right, but everyone else isn't. Although on paper, PlayStation Home seemed rather popular, with 1 in 3 PlayStation 3 owners using Home and 1.7 million repeat users as of 2010, the fact of the matter was that many of that 1/3 booted up the platform once, waited a very long time to be loaded into an area or queue for a virtual game, got a bit confused about what it was supposed to be, and then never touched it again. Those who stayed were in the minority and tended to fall into one of two camps: the folks that took the platform quite seriously and used it as Sony intended, and trolls. To be clear, the failure of PlayStation Home wasn't due to a lack of effort on Sony's part. In fact, they did their absolute darndest to get people interested. In June 2010, they released a virtual replica of their E3 booth on the platform, which showcased a load of different games for the Vita and gave users rewards for their engagement. On April 20th, 2011, a 1.50 version of PlayStation Home was released, which implemented dramatic improvements to both the graphics and the physics of the platform. They also brought in The Hub in November 2011, which introduced more games, as well as an activity board and a user-generated content system, and the option to watch full-length movies free of charge. Alas, PlayStation Home just ended up feeling like a half-baked version of Second Life or The Sims, and it became a gathering place for people who wanted to mess with one another. Conversations between the PlayStation Home faithful would frequently be interrupted by impromptu dance parties, and men would go around hitting on women who, more often than not, turned out to be men themselves.
He has been owned, I would say.
Sony finally admitted defeat when it came to PlayStation Home in March 2015 and shut it down for good. Surprisingly, it was quite profitable for the company, as the dedicated user base spent enough on microtransaction yachts and cuddly Stitchkins bunny toys from Lockwood to keep it ticking over. However, with the introduction of the PS4 in 2013, and because the platform hadn't been ported to the next generation console, the user base slowly started to dwindle. With hardly anyone using PlayStation Home anymore, it was no longer financially viable for Sony to continue supporting it, and on March 31st, 2015, it closed its doors for good, having never left the beta phase. Those who still used the platform regularly were quite devastated by the announcement, especially those that had funneled their hard-earned cash into the project, but for most Sony fans, PlayStation Home's disappearance from the gaming sphere didn't affect them in the slightest. By the time of its closure, PlayStation Home was home to over 10,000 different items and more than 230 games, and it's a crying shame that it turned into something that Sony never intended, i.e. an unwelcoming ghost town rather than the wholesome gaming community that the company had dreamed of. So, how come things didn't work out for PlayStation Home? Did Sony dream too big? Did they fail to anticipate the very nature of users when designing the platform? Or was the world simply not ready for the Metaverse? I think the answer to all three of those questions is yes. There's no doubt that Sony truly believed in the project, certainly at first, but the issue was that it seemed they didn't really know what they wanted PlayStation Home to be. Much of the platform's appeal was the ability to customize your avatar and apartment, but because most of the available items were locked behind paywalls, users just weren't interested. Furthermore, even before it was launched, it drew comparisons to Second Life, and whilst it was different enough from that game that it couldn't be accused of being a clone, everything it tried to do was done better in Second Life. The gaming side of the platform also never felt fully realized. I may have been among the many at the time who wished to see Home succeed, but why would I want to queue up for the likes of Home-exclusive Dragon's Green or even meet at my friend's virtual apartment before jumping into a fully fledged PS3 title together when I could bypass the whole rigmarole and just launch Warhawk from the comfort of the XMB? A distinct lack of identity wasn't PlayStation Home's only issue. It also had myriad bugs and glitches to contend with upon launch. Naturally, betas are buggy, and the very point of launching a game in beta is to allow developers to gather user feedback so that they can fix things before a game properly launches. When a piece of software is both sluggish and kind of pointless, however, people don't tend to stick around long enough to even bother pointing out the flaws. The truth here is that Sony launched PlayStation Home long before the world was ready for it. Social networking was in its infancy, and though the likes of MySpace and Facebook were nailing the formula, people weren't yet ready to transfer their entire lives to the internet. Online gaming, on the other hand, had become popular at the turn of the millennium, so gamers were more open to the technology. Perhaps the problem was that because Microsoft's own Xbox Live and hell, by comparison Sony's own PlayStation Network worked so well in isolation, people didn't deem it necessary to add in all of the bells, whistles, and realistically barriers that PlayStation Home offered. As I said a minute ago, you are either faced with launching Resident Evil 5 through PlayStation Home, earning some free posters and a costume for your avatar, or launching it natively, getting to punch some boulders with your friend that much quicker. As many shortcomings as PlayStation Home had, however, there were some good ideas in there, and it's a crying shame that I can't try the platform for myself. Or can I? No, I can't. Not right now anyway, but in the near future, I just might be able to. As we mentioned, the majority of PlayStation 3 owners didn't even notice that PlayStation Home had gone, let alone mourn the loss. However, that doesn't mean that the platform didn't have its fans who were truly devastated when Sony took the decision to close PlayStation Home in 2015. They waited patiently for a replacement, petitioned Sony to bring the platform back, and made countless YouTube videos begging the corporation to reinstate their beloved PlayStation Home, but sadly, this was all to no avail. Well, you know what they say, if you want something doing, do it yourself, and that's exactly what one group of dedicated PlayStation Home fans have been busying themselves with for the past few years. The project is called Destination Home, and it's being worked on by a number of the platform's fans who are doing so on a non-profit basis. Not only do they want to be able to bring back the community, but they also want to preserve PlayStation Home for future generations. Think of them as the Indiana Joneses of gaming. Possibly. You see, despite the harassment and the bugs and the lack of coherent vision from Sony, for many people, PlayStation Home was a huge success. Many PS3 owners from all over the world used it as a way to meet new people, and for those suffering from social anxiety, like Nagato, one of the people working on the Destination Home project, or those who just struggled to make new friends, it truly was a lifeline, giving them the opportunity to build relationships with others in a way they felt comfortable. Speaking to IGN in 2021, Nagato said, "I just remember seeing a post stating that Japan Home was closing down. It was just a store that was closing down, not like the entire server, but at the time I'm putting two and two together. PlayStation 4 had just been released, PS3 had had its heyday. I could see from a company standpoint that it was like, cut the plug on it. That was kind of sad, because I've spent many hours, met a lot of friends on Home. For me personally, during my young adolescence, I had anxiety issues. Home was a way for me to communicate to people from the outside world and actually share the same interests." Clearly, Sony hadn't just pulled the plug on a floundering service. They'd cut thousands of friends off from one another and provided no alternative. Still, folks like Nagato weren't willing to just let the platform die, and he and the Destination Home team began meticulously combing through their PS3s to see if they could find something, anything in the data that would allow them to resurrect PlayStation Home. By doing so, they've been able to reverse engineer the code and recreate PlayStation Home, initially as a single-player experience, but more recently as a multiplayer one, just as Sony had originally intended. The project is currently in its beta phase, much like the genuine article was, and as the devs are working on it in their spare time, there's no knowing if or when a full version will launch. I'm rooting for them though, as it's a testament to not only the power and perseverance of online gaming friendships, but also the very worthy cause of video game preservation. For many, PlayStation Home was a platform that barely registered in their consciousness, but as Destination Home proves, there were a great many people with whom it resonated. Sony might see it as something of a failed experiment, and to a degree, they're probably right, but the fact that there are people out there willing to dedicate their free time to restoring it proves that there was something in there. With more of a focused purpose that had less emphasis on microtransactions, a more robust infrastructure, safeguards in place to protect users from piss takers, and a release in the 2020s rather than the 2000s, PlayStation Home might just have been a success, but sadly, it seems that on this occasion, the fates just weren't aligned. Who knows? Perhaps Destination Home will get the platform back up and running and it'll be a roaring success. Perhaps other similar platforms will come along before they do and take the gaming public by storm, or maybe the world still isn't ready for the Metaverse. Regardless, it's undeniable that the original PlayStation Home experimented with a lot of the ideas that the likes of Fortnite are ruling the world with now, so rest easy, my creaky Metaverse friend. You crawled, so that others could crawl a little faster.
Your life, your network, your home. Only on PlayStation 3.